This is Deuteronomy chapter 4. Moses could have read all these instructions to Israel in 2 or 3 hours, so it's definitely possible he did just that. Starting here in chapter 4, Moses continues to address the crowd. His focus shifts from a history lesson to the importance of the law. The law is absolutely critical to this enterprise. Yahweh delivered the law to Moses mostly during the time they were at Sinai 39 or 40 years ago, and it's time for this new generation to be armed with it. They might have heard it before, but it's definitely time for a refresher course. The first part of this chapter is history's most famous prep talk ever as they gear up for the assault on the land. As for armament, this law is much more important than any instruments of war. Moses says, verse 1, "Now, Israel, listen to the statutes and to the ordinances which I teach you, to do them that you may live, and go in and possess the land which Yahweh, the God of your fathers, gives you." Comment, he says, that you may live. These words are life and death. Verse 2, "You shall not add to the word which I command you, neither shall you take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh your God, which I command you." Comment, I pray that as I speak to you during these comments, I never add or take away from the word of Yahweh. Verse 3, "Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did because of Baal Peor. For all the men who followed Baal Peor, Yahweh your God has destroyed them from among you. But you who are faithful to Yahweh your God are all alive today." Comment, Midian and Moab wanted to drive a wedge between Yahweh and Israel because they didn't want Israel to conquer any more land. So they used their young women to lure the Israelite men into the worship of their god Baal Peor, Numbers 31:16. Some of the Israelite men fell for it, and Yahweh destroyed those particular men with plague. As it says in verse 3, Yahweh your God destroyed them. Verse 5, "Behold, I have taught you statutes and ordinances, even as Yahweh my God commanded me, that you should do so in the middle of the land where you go in to possess it." Comment, these words are for hearing and then doing. Verse 6, "Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who shall hear all these statutes and say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to them as Yahweh our God is whenever we call on him?" Comment, quote, "Yahweh is near to all those who call on him, to all who call on him in truth." Psalm 145:18. Verse 8, "What great nation is there that has statutes and ordinances so righteous as all this law which I set before you today?" Comment, these are not laws made like sausages by a human legislature. Far from it, they're perfect. But in practice, only one perfect person would wind up totally keeping them. Verse 9, "Only be careful and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes saw, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. But make them known to your children and your children's children. The day that you stood before Yahweh your God in Horeb, when Yahweh said to me, Assemble the people to me, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live on the earth, and that they may teach their children." Comment, remember what you've seen and pass it on to the generations. Verse 11, "You came near and stood under the mountain. The mountain burned with fire to the heart of the sky, with darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. Yahweh spoke to you out of the middle of the fire. You heard the voice of words, but you saw no form. You only heard a voice." Comment, already the memory of this is dying out. Only the ones 43 years old and up have any chance of remembering this. It's already time to teach it to the children. Verse 13, "He declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even the 10 commandments. He wrote them on 2 stone tablets. Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and ordinances, that you might do them in the land where you go over to possess it. Be very careful, for you saw no kind of form on the day that Yahweh spoke to you in Horeb out of the middle of the fire, lest you corrupt yourselves and make yourself a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth." Comment, verse 15, "When Yahweh spoke to you at Sinai, you heard his voice, but you saw no form. You only saw smoke, thick darkness, and the appearance of a consuming fire on the mountain. Since you have not seen Yahweh's image, don't invent an image. And by the way, this was Yahweh's second commandment: no graven images, no idols. Verse 19, and lest you lift up your eyes to the sky when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the army of the sky, you are drawn away and worship them and serve them, which Yahweh your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole sky. But Yahweh has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be to him a people of inheritance, as it is today. Comment: Egypt was an iron furnace, and Israel was in it. They should remember what it was like in captivity, and never do anything that would cause Yahweh to expel them from their new land. Christian, you and I should remember any horrible thing from which Yahweh has brought us, and never do the things that would put us back there. Verse 21, furthermore, Yahweh was angry with me for your sakes, and swore that I should not go over the Jordan, and that I should not go into that good land which Yahweh your God gives you for an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not go over the Jordan, but you shall go over and possess that good land. Be careful lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your God which he made with you, and make yourselves a carved image in the form of anything which Yahweh your God has forbidden you. For Yahweh your God is a devouring fire, a jealous God. When you shall father children and children's children, and you shall have been long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, and make a carved image in the form of anything, and shall do that which is evil in Yahweh your God's sight, to provoke him to anger, I call on heaven and earth to witness against you today that you will soon utterly perish from off the land which you go over the Jordan to possess it. You will not prolong your days on it, but will utterly be destroyed. Comment: once again, these words are life and death. Verse 27. Yahweh will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where Yahweh will lead you away. There you shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. Comment: if they want evil, they can choose it. Romans 1:28, Yahweh will give them over to a reprobate mind without understanding. But as we go on to verse 29, even if Yahweh expels them from their land, he'll raise up a faithful remnant so that he and the ancient patriarchs aren't left without inheritance. Verse 29. But from there you shall seek Yahweh your God, and you shall find him when you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. When you are in oppression and all these things have come on you, in the latter days you shall return to Yahweh your God and listen to his voice. Comment: that's a line of sweeping prophetic significance. Quote, in the latter days you shall return to Yahweh your God and listen to his voice. End quote. Here also Hosea 3:5, quote, afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek Yahweh their God and David their king, and shall come with trembling to Yahweh and to his blessings in the last days. End quote. And Romans 11:26, when the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, quote, all Israel will be saved. End quote. Many students of prophecy believe this coming of Israel to Yahweh will happen during the Great Tribulation. Verse 31. For Yahweh your God is a merciful God. He will not fail you, neither destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which he swore to them. Comment: the fathers are the patriarchs of Genesis, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Verse 32. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that God created man on the earth, and from one end of the sky to the other, whether there has been anything as this great thing is, or has been heard like it. Did a people ever hear the voice of God speaking out of the middle of the fire as you have heard and live? Or has God tried to go and take a nation for himself from among another nation by trials, by signs, by wonders, by war, by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm, and by great terrors, according to all that Yahweh your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? Comment: remember, and think, could any of this have happened if the awesome God Yahweh was no God at all? Verse 35. It was shown to you so that you might know that Yahweh is God. There is no one else besides him. Comment, a skeptic would say this is a fable. He's certainly never seen anything like that. But if God were to do it again, that same skeptic would say it happens all the time. By the way, Yahweh has done it again. He's brought many of Israel back into the promised land after 2,000 years. But the skeptics yawn. Verse 36, out of heaven he made you to hear his voice, that he might instruct you. On earth he made you to see his great fire, and you heard his words out of the middle of the fire. Comment, that was at Sinai. Verse 37, because he loved your fathers, therefore he chose their offspring after them, and brought you out with his presence, with his great power out of Egypt, to drive out nations from before you, greater and mightier than you, to bring you in to give you their land for an inheritance as it is today. Comment, this is not going to be an ordinary military campaign. As the spy said 38 years ago, these people are so strong and numerous, and their cities are so fortified, they don't have a chance against them. As it says in verse 38, they're greater and mightier than Israel. Verse 37, it goes back to how Yahweh loved the patriarchs. That day Abraham obeyed Yahweh and put Isaac up for sacrifice was a very, very big deal. Genesis 22:6. Obedience is key. Verse 39, know therefore today and take it to heart that Yahweh himself is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. There is no one else. You shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which Yahweh your God gives you forever. Comment, that's one short line, 5 words that we should always remember. There is no one else, period. Now coming up, we must remember that Yahweh already commanded Israel to establish cities of refuge. 3 cities east of the Jordan and 3 cities west of it, Numbers 35:14. Anyone who accidentally kills anyone should flee to one of those cities to escape the avenger of blood. Since Israel already controls the land east of the Jordan, it's time to go ahead and name those 3 cities. Verse 41. Then Moses set apart 3 cities beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, that the manslayer might flee there, who kills his neighbor unawares, and didn't hate him in time past, and that fleeing to one of these cities he might live. Bezer in the wilderness in the plain country for the Reubenites, and Ramoth in Gilead for the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan for the Manassites. Comment, we don't know for a certainty the exact locations of any of those 3 cities, just the general areas. We're almost up to the actual recitation of the law. It's going to take at least 2 hours and a couple of dozen chapters for Moses to read and recite it all. But first the text will once again set the scene. Verse 44. This is the law which Moses set before the children of Israel. These are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances which Moses spoke to the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt, beyond the Jordan, in the valley over against Beth Peor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon, whom Moses and the children of Israel struck when they came out of Egypt. Comment, verse 46 once again, Moses set this information before the children of Israel in the valley of the Jordan River on land they took from Sihon the Amorite. Verse 47, they took his land in possession and the land of Og, king of Bashan, the 2 kings of the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from Auror, which is on the edge of the valley of the Arnon, even to Mount Sion, also called Hermon, and all the Arabah beyond the Jordan eastward, even to the sea of the Arabah, under the slopes of Pisgah. Comment, that's the chapter. We should point out that Yahweh changed the covenant 2,000 years ago. Now, we don't live or die by the law. We live or die by our faith and trust in Yahweh's Messiah of the world, Jesus Christ, Romans chapter 10. Find the next link easily for Deuteronomy 5 at landofhavilah.net, Deuteronomy 5.